Right now, in the same 3-week window, the Labour Party is holding strategic meetings, the PDP is holding strategic meetings, and a coalition of northern governors is holding strategic meetings. Not a single one of those meetings is about policy. Every single one is about who gets to sit at the top of a presidential ticket in 2027. And while Nigerians are busy debating whether Peter Obi is the right candidate or whether Atiku has the experience or whether Amaechi deserves a second look, nobody is asking the question that actually determines the outcome. Who controls the architecture of the alliance that makes any of these three men viable? And is that person already in a private conversation with all three of them simultaneously? 3 men, 1 ticket structure, 0 agreements, and a 2027 deadline that is closer than anyone in that room wants to admit. Stay with me. Before we go further, if you're new here, this channel exists for one reason: to give Nigerians the political analysis mainstream media is too afraid or too compromised to deliver. Hit subscribe and stay with me. This gets deeper. Let me tell you exactly what has been happening and why it is happening right now. In the space of roughly 6 weeks, credible political intelligence from Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt has confirmed the following. Peter Obi's inner circle has been in preliminary alliance talks with at least 2 major northern political networks. Not exploratory, preliminary. There's a difference, and the people in that room know exactly what the difference means. At the same time, Atiku Abubakar has refused publicly and pointedly to rule out another presidential run, despite the fact that the PDP, the party he once controlled like a private estate, is structurally closer to collapse than at any point since 2015. And Rotimi Amaechi, whose political rehabilitation since leaving the APC has been deliberate, disciplined, and almost invisible to the mainstream press, has been making quiet moves across River State, Cross River, and the South-South bloc in ways that are not consistent with a man positioning for a governorship. These are presidential track moves, and the people reading them correctly in the political class are not saying so publicly. So what triggered all of this? Why now? The answer is mechanical, not dramatic. INEC's projected 2027 election calendar means the serious ticket conversations must begin no later than the 3rd quarter of 2025. Any alliance that is not structurally formed by mid-2026 faces a mobilization deficit that money alone cannot overcome. This is not my analysis. This is the lesson of 2023, written in data. In 2023, the Labour Party and Peter Obi's movement crested early. The enthusiasm was real. The energy was visible. What was not visible and what ultimately cost them was the absence of northern coordination infrastructure capable of converting that enthusiasm into votes in the states that decide Nigerian presidential elections. The obedient movement filled stadiums. It did not fill polling units in Kano, Kaduna, Zamfara in the numbers that mattered. Now, the media framing of this current moment across television, newspapers, and the major digital platforms is a personality contest. Obi is framed as the new Nigeria, Atiku experience and northern reach, Amaechi insider reform. These frames are useful for communications teams. They do not explain the actual negotiation happening beneath them. The real negotiation is not about who runs for president. It is about who controls the vice presidential slot. In Nigeria's current federal arithmetic, the VP position is the structural anchor of any winning coalition. A Yoruba VP, a Middle Belt governor, a Northern Muslim technocrat with economic credentials, that single decision, more than the presidential name, determines whether any ticket can simultaneously reach 25% of votes in 24 states. And right now, all 3 men are holding that VP slot as a bargaining chip. None of them will lay it on the table first, because the first man to concede the VP slot has already signaled the limit of his ambition. Here's the fact that reframes everything, and you will not hear this in most of the commentary on this story. INEC's voter registration data from 2023 shows that the states where the opposition performed worst, Kano, Kaduna, Sokoto, Zamfara, are not ideologically hostile to anti-APC candidates. The sentiment was there. The problem was structural. The gap was not what people believed. The gap was what was organized on the ground to convert belief into ballots. And structure in Nigerian presidential politics is not built through rallies or social media momentum. It is built through VP selection, gubernatorial alliances, state party machinery, and delegate architecture, none of which any of the three men currently in this negotiation has locked in. That is the real story, and it starts in the institutions. Let us talk about institutions, because this is where the real power sits, and this is where most of the commentary completely loses the thread. The primary institutional arena for this negotiation is the party system itself. Specifically, the crisis of party identity that all three men are navigating in very different ways. Peter Obi remains in the Labour Party. The LP is constitutionally a functional, registered party. Operationally, it is thin at the state and local government level, particularly outside the South. If you go into LP's state chapter infrastructure in Kebbi, in Yobe, in Borno, what you find is skeletal. It is a presidential brand sitting on a party that does not have the roots to run a serious ground operation in the north. Atiku Abubakar controls a significant PDP network, but the PDP has a structural problem that is rarely discussed honestly. It is constitutionally designed for incumbency. The PDP was built to run government, to distribute resources from power. As an opposition party, its DNA works against it. The party structures at the state level are oriented around accessing federal patronage, not around building genuine grassroots opposition. And Amaechi has no declared party home, which is either strategic ambiguity, keeping his options open until the right moment, or structural weakness that will eventually force his hand. Depending on what the next 6 months produce, that calculation will become clear. Now, Section 131 of the 1999 Constitution sets presidential eligibility. That's not the issue. The critical constitutional provision is Section 221, which routes all electoral participation through registered parties. Every alliance these three men are building will eventually have to be housed inside a single party's nomination process. And that process is not a general election. It is a party primary, governed by that party's constitution, and in both the LP and PDP, the delegate structures of those primaries are controlled by state chapters. This is the mechanism that most commentary skips past: state chapters. Not national polls, not diaspora enthusiasm, state chapters hold more veto power over a presidential ticket than any of the three candidates currently being discussed publicly. Now, where does the law create useful ambiguity, and who benefits from it? Both the LP and PDP constitutions contain provisions allowing for emergency National Executive Committee decisions that can override state chapter positions under specific circumstances. That gap between state chapter control and NEC override power is precisely the space that powerful national political financiers exploit. It's the lever through which backroom deals become official party decisions. Has this happened before? Absolutely. In 2018, the PDP's NEC meeting that cleared Atiku's path to the 2019 presidential ticket did not happen by accident. It was preceded by 18 months of quiet NEC restructuring, the deliberate shifting of NEC composition away from state chapter factions aligned with former President Jonathan's network. By the time the primary was called, the outcome was already determined. Not by delegates, by NEC membership. This is not ancient history. This is the exact playbook that is available to whoever controls party machinery going into 2027. And INEC's role. Constitutionally, INEC is empowered to monitor party primaries, but its oversight at the delegate verification stage is limited by law and even more limited in practice. INEC cannot compel a party to produce its delegate register for pre-primary audit. The opacity at that stage is structural. It is not a loophole. It is a feature of how Nigerian party primaries actually function. Which brings me to something that runs through every document, every contact, and every private meeting connected to the current LP-PDP Amaechi triangulation. Across all of it, one institutional mechanism keeps surfacing. The question of which sitting governor has been quietly authorized to serve as the convener of a unity process. Not a mediator, a convener. The distinction matters enormously. A governor with that mandate is not a neutral broker, he's a kingmaker. And there's one name appearing consistently in those conversations, one figure whose position at the intersection of middle belt politics, PDP credentials, and cross-party business relationships makes him the most likely candidate for that convening role. I will return to what that name means for the actual ticket outcome when we get to the national implications, because it is more consequential than anything the three candidates themselves have publicly announced. Let us now go beneath the surface to the actual strategic calculations being made by each of the three men in this negotiation. Because they are not making the same calculation. They are not even playing the same game. Peter Obi. Obi benefits most from prolonged ambiguity in this negotiation. His base, urban, educated, digitally mobilized, pan-ethnic, but Igbo-anchored, does not require a formal coalition to remain energized. What it requires is the continued perception that Obi is the freshest, least compromised option in a field of recycled faces. Every month that Atiku and Amaechi visibly scramble for position reinforces that perception for free. Obi doesn't need to outmaneuver them publicly. He needs to let them outmaneuver each other. His real strategic work is happening quietly, and it is not where most people are looking. His team is courting northern civil society. Not northern political machinery, not governors, not party delegates. They are cultivating youth networks, market associations, and Islamic civil organizations that operate entirely beneath the patronage tier. This is a 2023-era strategy applied more deliberately, trying to build northern legitimacy from the bottom up rather than through elite endorsement. Whether that strategy can produce 25% in the Northwest and Northeast is the central unresolved question of his candidacy. Atiku Abubakar. Atiku faces the most acute strategic time pressure of the three. His core value proposition, Northern Muslim reach, PDP machinery, and international business credibility is a depreciating asset. Each election cycle he does not win, that proposition loses value. His northern network is real, but it is aging. The younger northern political class that the APC has been cultivating since 2015 through appointments, contracts, and gubernatorial investments is not Atiku's natural constituency. They did not grow up in his political orbit. If he does not convert his current positioning into a locked ticket structure, VP commitment, governor alliances, and NEC alignment by early 2026, the northern governors who privately support him will begin to hedge. Political loyalty in Nigeria does not survive sustained non-viability. The moment Atiku looks like he cannot win, the network that makes him viable starts making phone calls to other candidates. Rotimi Amaechi. Amaechi's risk is structural. He is attempting a political rebuild without a party, without a governorship, and without a consolidated public base outside Rivers State, a state whose internal politics remain dominated by Governor Fubara's consolidation. The Rivers political space that Amaechi once commanded has effectively been reorganized around a different center of gravity. His leverage is specific. It's his insider knowledge of how the APC federal government has operated, contracts, appointments, budget lines, institutional relationships, and his credibility with northern political elites who dealt with him during his time as a federal minister and party chairman. But insider knowledge is only leverage if you are in a position to deliver something. Without a party platform, without state-level infrastructure, Amaechi's deliverables remain abstract. He can offer counsel. He cannot yet offer votes. Now, who risks losing power, revenue, or influence depending on how this resolves? The Southeast political establishment has a structural stake in Obi's candidacy that goes beyond personal loyalty. If Obi is squeezed out of the ticket, either by an Atiku consolidation or by a merger deal that places a non-Igbo at the top, the political morale and strategic positioning of the Southeast within the Nigerian Federation takes a hit that has consequences well beyond 2027. This is why Igbo governors, even those with APC affiliations, are watching this negotiation very closely. Their public silence is not disengagement, it is calibrated waiting. On the 2027 electoral calculation, let me be precise about the mathematics because this is what makes the three-way competition so politically dangerous.
The presidential formula requires 25% of votes in at least 24 states and a plurality nationally. In 2023, Peter Obi won 18 states, Atiku won 12. Combined, they exceeded Tinubu's national vote total. They lost not because the opposition was unpopular, but because their votes were split across two candidates in a first-past-the-post system. The coalition logic is arithmetically obvious. Obi's popular base plus Atiku's structural northern reach equals a coalition that can plausibly hit the threshold. Separately, neither of them comfortably does. And everyone in this negotiation knows this arithmetic, which is why the failure to consolidate is not ignorance, it is ego. And ego at this level of Nigerian politics is almost always a proxy for something transactional. Whose name is first on the ballot? Who controls the appointment of the campaign director? Who holds the power over post-election patronage? These are not small questions. These are the actual negotiations, and they are unresolved. Now, the silent stakeholders. Who has not spoken and why their silence is itself a signal? The most significant silence in this entire conversation is from the Yoruba political establishment. Lagos-based business networks, Afenifere-aligned political voices, and the residual infrastructure of former Southwest governors have said almost nothing publicly about the opposition's 2027 ticket. When three non-Yoruba men are negotiating a presidential coalition and the entire Yoruba political class is quiet, that is not neutrality. That is a bloc that is either already committed to the APC or waiting to auction its support to the highest bidder in the final 12 months before the election. Which one it is will be one of the 2 or 3 most consequential political facts of 2026.
Amaechi's recent public appearances have been funded through a network of South-South business interests that previously backed the APC's River State operations during his governorship years. The money is familiar, the political direction is different. Obi's Labour Party has received reported Diaspora support, but the party's state-level operational budget, what it actually costs to run a primary and field agent in 36 states, remains publicly unaccounted for. Enthusiasm does not pay logistics. Someone is or is not solving that problem. Which one it is will tell you everything about how serious the LP is as a 2027 vehicle. Atiku's financing is the most opaque, but also the most historically documented. His 2019 campaign was largely self-funded through his Intel's-linked business network. There is no public indication that model has changed, which means his campaign is in effect a personal financial commitment, not a coalition-funded operation. That matters for the question of who he is accountable to if he wins. But here is what almost nobody has connected yet, and it changes the entire picture. The fundraising gap between what these three men publicly represent and what a competitive national presidential campaign actually costs in Nigeria has one direct implication that the commentary has not addressed. The candidate who solves the financing problem first will have already made the structural commitments to governors, to party NEC members, to northern delegates, to Southwest power brokers before the de facto nominee, before the primary is even announced. And those financing conversations are not happening in the rooms being reported. They are happening in boardrooms, in private residences in Abuja, and in hotel suites during events that have no obvious political character. The ticket will be decided before the primary, and the primary will ratify what money built. What does all of this mean for Nigeria as a country, not just as an electoral contest? Start with the federal balance. The specific configuration of any opposition ticket has direct consequences for how power is distributed between the center and the states. A Peter Obi-led ticket with a northern Muslim VP signals a continuation of the zoning orthodoxy, familiar enough to the northern establishment to be tolerable, reform-branded enough to attract the urban base. An Atiku-led ticket risks replicating the 2019 structure in a political environment that has demonstratively moved past the appetite for familiar faces. And an Amaechi-led ticket, however improbable it currently looks, would represent the first time since 1999 that a Rivers-born politician stood at the head of a national opposition coalition.
The implications for the Niger Delta's relationship to the presidency, for resource control conversations, for amnesty program continuity, for the politics of oil revenue distribution go beyond party allegiance. On economic consequences for ordinary Nigerians, the 2027 election is occurring against a backdrop of economic pain that is not abstract. Inflation has restructured household budgets across income levels. The Naira's depreciation has made imports, including food staples, more expensive for people who are already stretched. The aftermath of the fuel subsidy removal has altered the cost of every economic activity that involves transportation, which is almost every economic activity. In this environment, the opposition's economic credibility is not a campaign message. It is the primary lens through which undecided voters, especially in the urban south and the urban north, will evaluate the ticket. Peter Obi's brand is fiscal discipline. His 2023 campaign consistently returned to the question of government waste and the misalignment between oil revenue and public services. Atiku's brand is private sector liberalization, deregulation, foreign investment, the idea that releasing the economy from state interference will generate growth. Amaechi's brand, to the extent it has crystallized, is infrastructure-linked federal spending, the model he deployed as transportation minister with the railway projects. These are not interchangeable economic visions. The ticket's economic identity will be shaped by who is at the top, and that economic identity will determine whether the urban middle class that powered the 2023 obedient waves sees enough continuity to mobilize again, or whether it concludes that this is just another set of elite faces rearranging the furniture.
Security implications. A fragmented opposition that fails to build a coherent northern coalition sends a specific signal to bandits, to insurgent networks, to separatist voices, and to international actors watching Nigeria's stability. It signals that the political center is structurally incapable of offering a credible alternative to the current administration. Conversely, and this is often missed, a credible opposition coalition that demonstrates genuine North-South integration at the ticket level has a stabilizing effect. It signals that national political competition is still a viable mechanism for power transfer. And the viability of that mechanism is the single most effective institutional deterrent to extra-constitutional action. On national cohesion, let me say something clearly that most analysts in this space avoid. The Igbo presidency question does not disappear from this negotiation. It is central to it. Igbo Obi's candidacy, if it advances to the 2027 general election, will be the second consecutive electoral cycle in which an Igbo man has led a major national presidential effort. The symbolic and political weight of that trajectory cannot be separated from the structural dynamics of the ticket negotiation. A second consecutive failure, particularly if it results from elite deal-making that effectively sidelines Igbo Obi, would have implications for Southeast political morale and for the region's strategic positioning within the Nigerian Federation that would outlast any single election. Now, the figure, whose name I flagged earlier, the one appearing at the intersection of every document, every private meeting, and every alignment conversation connected to this story. Here is what his role actually means. He is a sitting governor. He's from a middle belt state. He holds PDP credentials while maintaining operational relationships with APC-adjacent business networks. He has a personal relationship with members of Atiku's inner circle and separately with figures in Obi's advisory network. His public posture is that of a state-focused administrator with no federal ambitions. His actual posture, the one visible in his travel patterns, his guest lists, and his private communications, is that of a man who has been authorized to structure the delegate architecture of whichever party ends up hosting the joint ticket. That is the role. Not mediator, architect. And controlling delegate architecture in a Nigerian party primary is controlling the outcome. Full stop. None of the three presidential candidates has publicly acknowledged his existence in this process.
That silence, on all sides, is confirmation, not denial. Here is the data point that reframes the national stakes in a way that most of the commentary has not reached. In every competitive Nigerian presidential election since 1999, the candidate who controlled the most governorship alliances 6 months before the party primary won the primary. Every time, without exception. Regardless of national polling, regardless of popular momentum, regardless of diaspora funding or social media, governors' networks, not popular sentiment, decide Nigerian presidential primaries. And on that specific metric, as of right now, none of the three men in this negotiation holds a decisive lead. Nigeria's 2027 presidential election is not only a domestic story. There are foreign governments, multilateral institutions, and international business networks with real stakes in its outcome. Let me be precise about what those stakes are and what they are not. The United States government, through its democracy promotion architecture and its Lagos and Abuja embassy networks, has a documented interest in Nigerian opposition viability. After the 2023 elections, which the U.S. State Department criticized in measured but pointed diplomatic language, there has been a quiet reassessment within American diplomatic circles. The question being asked in those circles is which Nigerian political actors represent governance that is stable, democratic, and aligned with the kind of institutional reform that protects American commercial and security interests in the region. Peter Obi's 2023 campaign received significant international attention. His post-election legal challenge was monitored closely by Western missions. His continued presence in the opposition space is noted. The United Kingdom's stake is structural and financial. The UK-Nigeria relationship is entangled at the institutional level with asset recovery frameworks, financial crime investigations, and the management of Nigerian elite wealth held in British institutions. A change of government in Abuja changes the complexion of those conversations. Any opposition candidate perceived to be capable of winning will begin receiving quiet diplomatic signals. Not endorsements, never endorsement, but signals. Within months of being seen as genuinely viable, the nature of meetings available to that candidate in London and Washington will shift noticeably. China's interest is transactional and infrastructure-bound. China has ongoing Belt and Road adjacent commitments in Nigeria, railway projects, power infrastructure, port investment, that are contractually structured to survive government transitions. China's preference is not ideological, it is continuity of contracts. The implication for this negotiation is simple. Chinese diplomatic and business networks in Nigeria will maintain private communication with all three candidates. They will not publicly favor any opposition figure, but they will quietly ensure that whoever emerges understands what commitments are on the table. For Nigerians in the diaspora, particularly those who were central to the 2023 obedient movement, this is the moment to be honest about what the diaspora contribution actually achieved and what it didn't. The diaspora powered the narrative of 2023 in ways that were genuinely remarkable. The social media infrastructure, the fundraising, the international media attention, these were real. But the presidential election was not decided by the narrative. It was decided by state-level party structure, delegate control, and ground operations in states where the LP had almost no presence. Diaspora money that went to national communications did not reach Sokoto local government coordinators. It did not fund polling unit agents in Zamfara. It did not build the infrastructure that converts votes. For 2027, the diaspora's strategic contribution needs to shift. The enthusiasm is not the problem. The targeting of that enthusiasm is. If diaspora funding in 2026 flows to state chapter registration, local party infrastructure, and polling unit operations in the north, not to another Lagos rally, the mathematics changes. If it flows the same way it did in 2023, the outcome will rhyme with 2023. What I am about to take you to now is where this story becomes genuinely consequential, because the counter-arguments being made by serious people in defense of the current fragmented situation are not frivolous, and dismantling them requires understanding exactly why they are wrong.
Let me give the strongest possible argument against forced consolidation, because it deserves a serious answer, not a dismissal. Those who argue that the three-way competition should continue without elite-engineered coalition building make a point that has historical weight. Premature coalition building produces weak candidates. The PDP's experience with consensus candidacies, including Atiku's own 2023 run, which was a product of internal party deal-making more than popular enthusiasm, demonstrates that a candidate assembled through backroom elite agreements does not automatically generate the popular energy needed to win a general election. The argument runs like this. Peter Obi's genuine popular support is real. Atiku's structural northern reach is real. Amaechi's institutional credibility is real. Forcing them into a single vessel prematurely could hollow out whichever candidate ends up leading the ticket. Let the primary decide. Let the best organized candidate win. This is a serious argument. Now let me tell you precisely why it fails. It fails on the evidence of 2023. The opposition collectively outpolled the APC in that election nationally. They lost because their votes were divided, not because any single candidate lacked popular support. The problem is not candidate quality. The problem is a first-past-the-post electoral system operating against a field that refuses to consolidate. The "let the primary decide" argument only holds if the primary is an open, competitive, delegate-driven process. And we have already established that Nigerian party primaries are not that. They are NEC-structured, governor network-determined processes that ratify decisions made in private before the delegate vote is cast. Let the primary decide is in practice let the party brokers decide, which is exactly the problem the opposition claims to be running against. Now, three major misconceptions that are distorting how most Nigerians are reading this story. The first misconception is that this is primarily an ethnic calculation. It is not, or at least not in the straightforward way the conventional wisdom suggests. The 2023 results are the evidence. Obi won significant support in non-Igbo states, including parts of the Middle Belt and even some northern states. Atiku significantly underperformed in states that his ethnic network was supposed to reliably deliver. Ethnicity matters in Nigerian politics. It would be dishonest to say otherwise, but it is mediated by patronage networks, security conditions, voter registration infrastructure, and the quality of local party organization in ways that make it less mechanically predictive than the simple ethnic arithmetic suggests. If it were purely an ethnic calculation, the 2023 results would have looked very differently. They did not. The second misconception is that Amaechi is a spoiler candidate with no serious intent, a man who couldn't win an internal APC contest and is now casting around for relevance. This reading is wrong, and it matters that it is wrong. Amaechi's political move since 2023, the deliberate cultivation of South-South business networks, the quiet outreach to northern political figures, the careful public positioning around infrastructure and reform are consistent with a man who has a specific and calculated path in view. That path is not the presidency, it is the vice presidential shortlist. Amaechi may not be running for president at all. He may be engineering his position as the most attractive running mate available for either Obi or Atiku, whose South-South credentials, insider institutional knowledge, and northern political credibility fill the gaps that neither of the two leading candidates can fill on their own. If that is the play, it is actually quite smart, and it is the read that the serious political class in Abuja is currently making. Now, the piece of evidence that almost everyone on both sides of this debate has completely missed. In the 2023 supplementary elections, the quieter, less covered contests held for governorships and state assemblies in the same electoral cycle, the PDP outperformed the Labour Party in 14 states where Obi had outperformed Atiku in the presidential race. Read that slowly again. Obi at the top of the ticket, PDP below him, in the same states on the same day. What that split reveals is something precise and important. Obi's personal brand travels across state lines and across party affiliations. The Labour Party's party structure does not. The enthusiasm follows the man, the infrastructure follows the party. And in Nigerian elections, on the day that matters, infrastructure is what moves votes. Any coalition that wants to use Obi's name as its presidential draw must pair it with a party machine that has genuine state-level reach. And the only party in this negotiation that has that reach, damaged, fragmented, and mismanaged as it is, remains the PDP. Now, if what I just told you surprises you, drop a comment below. I want to know what you think before we get to the part that changes everything. Let me tell you the 3 most likely next moves in this negotiation, what to watch for, what escalation looks like, and what 2027 means for Nigeria if this trajectory holds. The first likely move belongs to Atiku. He will force the PDP unity conversation by announcing a series of reconciliation meetings with PDP governors in the north, framing it publicly as party rebuilding, presenting himself as the elder statesman putting the party above personal ambition. But the functional effect of that move is not reconciliation, it is positioning. It signals to Peter Obi that any Labour-PDP merger or any joint candidacy arrangement must proceed on Atiku's terms because Atiku controls the machine. The meetings are a message, not a process. Watch for which northern governors attend those meetings and how they are described afterwards. That attendance list is the actual news. The second likely move belongs to Obi. His team will make a quiet, non-public approach to 2 or 3 northern middle belt governors, specifically targeting those who have cross-party credibility and who face 2027 gubernatorial vulnerabilities of their own and therefore need a presidential patron with a viable shot at power. This approach will not produce an announcement. It will produce a private commitment, a handshake that creates an obligation without a press release. The signal to watch for is which northern governors begin appearing at Labour Party events, state functions, commissioning ceremonies, even funerals, without an obvious explanation for why they are there. Unexplained proximity is the tell. The third likely move belongs to Amaechi. He publicly declares for a specific party, most probably the PDP, whose ongoing crisis makes it a vehicle available as a vehicle, and immediately positions himself not as a presidential candidate competing for the top slot, but as a national consensus builder. This is the smart move for a man whose leverage is his access and institutional knowledge. A publicly declared Amaechi running within the PDP primary changes the geometry of that negotiation in a specific way. It gives the PDP's National Executive Committee a third option to use as leverage against Atiku. It gives Atiku a competitor he must negotiate with rather than dismiss. And it gives Peter Obi a potential running mate whose South-South identity does not double up on Obi's Igbo base, which is exactly what a ticket headed by an Igbo presidential candidate needs to demonstrate genuine regional breadth. What specific signals should Nigerians be watching in the coming months? Watch INEC's party monitoring reports for Labour Party state chapter registrations between now and the end of 2025. If those registrations spike, Obi's team has made a definitive decision to use the LB as the primary vehicle, and they are investing in making it viable. If they do not, the LB vehicle is either being quietly abandoned or the financing question has not been resolved. Watch the PDP's National Working Committee membership. Any restructuring of that body in the next 6 months is not administrative housekeeping. It is a NEC play. Someone is repositioning the delegate architecture for a specific primary outcome. And watch which northern governors host political events, not party events, not government events, but those events that bring political figures together without an official label. The Middle Belt convener, whose name runs through every document connected to this negotiation, will signal his role not through a press conference. He will signal it through his guest list. When you see who sits in that room, you will know who is building the ticket. What does escalation look like if this fails to consolidate?
Escalation is 3 separate candidacies: Obi on the Labour Party, Atiku on the PDP, Amaechi on a third platform or a minor party vehicle. That scenario does not just rerun 2023 with diminishing returns, it actively accelerates the fragmentation of opposition political infrastructure. The APC wins with fewer votes than 2023. The opposition argues fraud again. The courts produce another outcome that satisfies nobody, and the institutional legitimacy of competitive democracy in Nigeria absorbs another structural blow. Not a fatal one, but a cumulative one. What would de-escalation require? It requires one of the 3 men to accept the vice presidential slot, publicly and without a contractual guarantee of the 2031 presidential ticket. In the political culture of elite Nigerian ambition, that is not a small ask. It may be an impossible one without the right broker applying the right combination of incentive and pressure. The question is not whether anyone in this negotiation has the political wisdom to make that concession. The question is whether the political system has produced a broker with enough credibility, resources, and relationships to deliver that outcome. The Middle Belt convener I have described is the closest thing to that broker currently visible. Whether he is empowered, by whom, on whose terms, is the question that will answer itself in 2026. And if this trajectory continues uncorrected, if Nigeria reaches 2032 having had 4 consecutive APC presidential terms built on opposition fragmentation, what are the long-term consequences? The parties that repeatedly fail will face funding crises, mass defections, and the collapse of state chapters. The civil society infrastructure that powered 2023 will fracture between those who continue to believe in electoral competition and those who are drawing different conclusions about what it will take to change this country's political direction. That's not a prediction of violence or instability. It's a political science description of what happens when democratic competition repeatedly fails to produce the one thing democratic competition is supposed to produce: the possibility of alternation.
Now to the question I opened with. Who controls the architecture of the alliance that makes any of these 3 men viable? And is that person already in a private conversation with all 3 simultaneously? Here is the answer that the full weight of this analysis has been building towards. It is not Peter Obi. It is not Atiku Abubakar. It is not Rotimi Amaechi. It is the coalition of Middle Belt governors, Northern delegate brokers, and Southern business networks whose private commitments will determine which party hosts the ticket, who leads it, and who becomes the vice presidential anchor of the coalition. The 3 men whose names dominate the headlines are the product of that architecture, not its authors. They are the visible face of a decision that is being made in rooms that are not being reported, by people who will never appear in a thumbnail, by processes that will not be visible until they have already produced an outcome. The architecture is being designed right now. The question Nigerians should be watching, with everything this analysis has built towards, is not which of the 3 will win. It is who is in the room where those commitments are being made, because that person is building the 2027 ticket. And it is not any of the 3 names you have heard most this week. We have moved through the institutions, the financing, the governors' networks, the international stakes, and the private architecture of a negotiation that is being conducted almost entirely outside public view. What lands at the end of it all is this: the opposition's arithmetic for 2027 is real. The popular appetite for change is documented and measurable. The combined vote totals from 2023 make the mathematical case for consolidation obvious. None of that is in question. What is in question is whether 3 men with specific ambitions, specific financial networks, and specific calculations about their own post-election relevance can subordinate any of that to the structural discipline that winning actually requires, and whether a broker capable of engineering that discipline exists and is already active. There is one question I want to leave with you, and I want you to put your answer in the comments because I will be reading them. If the coalition fails, If 2027 produces another three-way opposition race and another APC term, at what point does the structural failure of Nigerian opposition politics stop being a candidate problem, a question of who is running and whether they can cooperate, and start being a system problem, a question of whether the rules, the institutions, and the incentive structures of Nigerian politics can actually produce opposition consolidation at all? Put that answer in the comments. I want to know where you stand. If this analysis gave you clarity, share it with one person who needs to understand what's really happening in Nigeria. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.